Good morning, everyone. Monetary Board members, Deputy Governors, other colleagues at the Central Bank, my dear friends. First of all, I want to say thank you to those of you who have been here physically, a few of you, and all the others who are joining us virtually to share with us this particular moment where we are unfolding the first step, as the Deputy Governor mentioned, in a long journey which we believe is a very important one for our country. We have titled it the 6-month roadmap deliberately because we believe this has to be a concerted effort initially in order to deal with the challenges that we are facing. We would, of course, have the normal roadmap that we would unfold in due course, which would be for the future. But as of now, we are addressing the different tensions that are being felt in our economy so that those of you who have sought clarity and certainty would be provided with that today, hopefully. We all know that Sri Lanka was once graciously referred to as the wonder of Asia. It still is, in my view. And we also expect miracles from our country. And I still believe it is possible to believe in miracles and to go forward. And I believe that is what we are hoping to instill in ourselves, a discipline where we can really reach out to that future that we are preparing for ourselves. So in my first half, I will let you into the background of what we are going into today, the tensions that we feel. I won't go into the details of why it has been caused, but I will look at as-is situation. And going forward, in the next maybe 40 minutes or so, we would deal with how we are going to do it and where we are hoping to go. So that will be the general outline of what we are going to do. So you can sit back and relax and then get ready to go through that journey. We all know that there is a fear about the current economic challenges. And there is reason to believe as well that there could be tensions. And I think that's part of this entire understanding of the situation. There has been sluggish growth, COVID pandemic, increase in non-performing loans, increase in central bank's treasury bill holdings, the reduction in the reserves, increase in remittance flows, increase in unauthorized remittance flows, stockpiling of imported goods, hostile international media reports, shortage of foreign currency, sharp depreciation of the rupee, concerns expressed regularly about debt sustainability, weakened revenues, unfavorable sovereign ratings, concerned consumers, SMEs having concerns, deterioration of confidence. All that is, I think, a reflection of the underlying situation in the country. Not only for us, I think it's there for all over lots of countries in the world. The last time we checked, we found that because of the COVID pandemic and other resultant issues, about 123 countries had been downgraded. So we are all going through a journey which is difficult. In addition, of course, we do hear doomsday reports. Quite a number of them are seen regularly. I also happen to read those carefully to see whether there is any merit in those. Sometimes there are some useful parts in those, sometimes not. But that's the world that we are living in, and everyone gets across their message in some way or the other. There is enough opportunities to do that. So I think that's another part of the equation as we go along. Let's have a quick look at the situation, where we were a few years ago and where we are now. Let's look at 2014, where our economy was in the region of about nearly $80 billion. Now, also, we are in the same range. I did have some interesting comments at the time that I first went into the Monetary Board 2 weeks ago. And then it was like coming home to a time that has not changed. The GDP especially was about 80 billion when I left. And when I came back also, it was around the same number. So obviously it was a little discomforting, but at the same time comforting, because it was as if there has been no change at all. But that's part of the whole equation. Not only for us, I think it has been for the whole world. There has been a general reduction, which means now we got to work hard at that. We found that the GDP per capita has also come down a little bit. Merchandise exports are pretty much at similar levels as 2014, and so as so many other macro fundamentals also remain at reasonably constant levels, although a few have deteriorated as well. The weakened economy, along with the effect of COVID-19, has caused anxiety, as we all know, and that's the new challenge that we are now facing. The economy grew by 8% in the first half, which was commendable. Had we not been able to record that kind of growth, it would have been that we are officially in recession. So fortunately, we didn't have to do that. Although on a low base, Sri Lanka did have an improvement in its growth. And we found that even the sectors concerned have also been gradually improving, which gives us some comfort that there is an underlying situation within the entire economy that gives us hope that we can move forward with a lot more confidence. The external sector in particular has had some serious challenges, and there has been, more than the challenge itself, the regular commentary that suggests that the challenge is insurmountable. A lot of times I hear comments that we should approach different agencies, but if you just look at the situation from 2019 end onwards, Sri Lanka had reserves of 7.6 billion at the end of 2019. Thereafter, notwithstanding what a lot of people have been saying, we have paid back 6 billion in the year 2020. Then we paid back a further 5.6 billion in 2021 so far. And we are now with a reserve of around 5 billion, which is consisting of 3.5 billion in cash and a swap arrangement that we have for another 1.5 billion. So technically that shouldn't have been possible if you're only looking at the reserve and doing our calculations to say, look, we are unable to pay. Now that's lots of times what happens. People look at the reserve, then they do a little arithmetic, forget that there are inflows that are due to come, and then they come to the conclusion that here is a country that is going to have trouble. So they extend it to 2029, and they will say that there is an amount of $29 billion due, and how are these people going to pay when they have only $5 billion? In that case, that situation would have been a lot worse today. So what it tells us is that you got to understand reserve management is not only dealing with the reserves that we have, but dealing with the inflows as well. Making sure that inflows come in at the right time. None of the companies that you're talking about as being gilt-edged companies would be in a position to pay back all their loans in one shot. That's why you have balance sheets which has current liabilities, current assets, long-term liabilities. So those are all balanced in such a way that we can move forward. So I can assure you that this criticism that sometimes arises, that Sri Lanka will face difficulties, is misplaced, because we have already shown in the last 2 years that it can be done, and you can be sure that even in the next few years, it will be done in the same way. The budget deficit has, of course, increased. There has been a reason for that. The pandemic itself has absorbed nearly 200 billion rupees of additional expenditure, which the government had to meet. And if not for that fact, we would have been not having this situation today. So that kind of expenditure has to be provided for. And with all that, we have still been able to maintain inflation at broad, comfortable levels, although there has been some tension there as well. And the amount of money supply has also had to be increased for good measure. Again, that has happened in so many other countries as well. Many countries have responded to the pandemic with that kind of a reaction, which is important. We have also seen, when quantified, that the support that has been given by the government to deal with the pandemic, as well as the central bank to deal with the pandemic, has been very, very impressive. A lot of people have not appreciated that, and sometimes the few months that I was in Parliament, I realized that that had not been sufficiently explained as to what kind of a support has already been given. And I believe it's necessary for us to appreciate that there has been a huge amount of work that has been done as well. The COVID Saubhagya scheme that has been provided by the central bank at very low interest rates in order to support the industries as well as the SMEs as well as businesses has been a very large 165 billion rupees. That's about 1.1% of GDP. The support to the government has been around 2002 billion rupees. The savings of the private sector as a result of the reduced interest amounts to 365 billion. So sometimes when you see very impressive bottom lines being shown by some companies, although there would have been a lot of work done by those companies themselves, a part of it has been provided by my predecessor, Professor Lakshman, who has been the man who had made the interest rates low enough for those profits to be made. So I believe that's another important recognition that we should sometimes appreciate as well. At the same time, the government has also benefited with the low interest regime that was maintained, 313 billion. Now I'm saying that to make it known that the low interest regime is a very important factor if we are to make our businesses a lot more viable than what we have today. So sometimes in times of stress, it may not be possible to keep it at those levels. That is why all need to cooperate so that we can maintain it at those levels, at reasonable levels, so that both lenders and borrowers could benefit by a situation of that nature. The monetary policy easing measures have been also very helpful. The extended debt moratoria, which the government as well as the central bank put together, was an important factor in order to ensure that businesses survive these difficult times. And of course, we have all seen the proactive vaccination measures, the fiscal stimuli that was being given by the government, the tax exemptions, a lot of other areas where a lot of work can be done in order to provide the system with a certain degree of stability. The vaccination program is over here, and I think we have a very good outcome that has happened there. And what does it take, where does it take to us now? I believe we got to appreciate again that we have faced tough challenges in the past. Of course, we can begin with 1505 to 1948, 443 years of foreign domination. And we came up, notwithstanding what some people might say, we had just one university in 1948. So after 443 years of foreign domination, we had one university. All those countries that dominated us had a lot more universities than that. We today have 17 state universities and about 46 universities of the private sector. So we have come a long way. Only 1% of the people had electricity and water in 1948. Today, nearly 99.9% of the people have electricity, 43% of people have water on tap, and in the next 4 to 5 years, we would ensure that about 85% of the people would have water on tap. So those are the factors that we have been able to generate in the last 73 years. We have gone through a 3-decade conflict, 2 insurrections, power and energy crisis, droughts, pandemics, tsunamis, double-digit inflation, depletion of foreign reserves in the past, so many different types of struggles that we have had, but we have come out on top always. So what are we hoping to do today? We are trying to see how we are going to give clarity to the economy. And clarity doesn't come with one intervention alone. It has to come from several interventions, and the burden should be shared by all stakeholders. if it is just one stakeholder who is putting their hand up and going to be the one who would deal with the situation, I don't think it would work. It has to be a shared approach. It's like all of us are going in a boat in stormy seas. We all have to go in a certain disciplined manner. We have to move forward without rocking the boat, especially in times of turbulence. If we don't do that and we don't have a journey which is methodical and which is done in a proper manner, it is likely that the boat would capsize. So if you want to keep the boat heading in the right direction and moving in the right direction, we got to all understand what the role of each stakeholder should be, and we should accordingly move forward. So I've just put down, we have worked out the different sectors: government, banking sector, people, central bank, importers, exporters, capital and debt markets, sovereign rating agencies, exchange houses, service exporters, investors, development partners. All of them will need to move together in a cohesive pattern. The central bank is the agency that has been entrusted with the responsibility of delivering economic and price stability as well as financial system stability. It sounds simple, but the reason why the society has provided that entire responsibility to an institution is because they know it is important for that institution to deliver that for the country. It is only when you don't have stability that you realize what stability is. If you don't have stability of the foreign exchange rate at which this rupee trades, then you realize that it is not easy for you to do your businesses. If you do not know what the next year is going to bring, then your business will also be affected. So you need a comfort that there is a stable environment, and that is what the central bank is expected to do by law, and that is why the central bank intends to do, because that is our duty and responsibility by the country, by the people of this country, to deliver that stability. So today's plan that is unfolded would be addressing that very important factor, that we are providing the stability for the markets as well as to everyone. So our plan would be, in overall plan, although we are only focusing on the number one, will be a 6-month plan, which is what we are going to do today, and then a 1-year horizon, and then a medium to long-term plan. The first 6 months is immediate stabilization. We want to have stability. The second is consolidation. And the third is building the cushions to be able to absorb any shocks for the future. It's like a 50-over match, and within the first 10 overs, you have lost 4 wickets, not very many runs on the board, then you got to stabilize. If the number 5 and number 6 batsmen get onto the crease and start hitting out, I don't think the match will be won. So you got to first stabilize, make sure that you have the necessary wickets in hand so that you can approach the rest of the overs with a lot more confidence. Then you consolidate, where you score a few runs so that the target doesn't become too high, and at the same time, you are amassing the strength to move into the next phase. The third phase would be a lot more comfortable, but at the same time, there will be risks there as well. And then you've got to ensure that you have the necessary cushions. So your eye must be in so that you can hit the ball well. And that's part of the strategy of a good cricket team. So if you follow that, I think this match could also be won. The central bank will take immediate steps to ensure stability, and the proper management of this period will result in clarity and certainty. Thereafter, we envisage the foreign exchange direct investments to come. We envisage tourism to improve. We envisage the other factors that have, the building blocks that have been put in place, particularly the pharmaceutical industry, the monetization of certain underutilized assets. All those will kick in a lot more strongly, and then Sri Lanka will be able to move forward with a lot more clarity. So the new efforts will demand moderate contributions from all stakeholders, the government, the central bank, the banking sector, merchandise and service exporters, importers, retailers, and the global Sri Lankans as main stakeholders, but there will be others also who will have to play their part. We know the problem. That's why we went through this long discourse, because sometimes some people believe that we don't know the problem. And they tell us this is the problem. Yes, we also know that there is a problem. But now it is our turn to find the solutions, and that's why some of those problems are significant. There's pressure on the fiscal operations, there's accumulation of external debt, and the debt raised through ISPs has been somewhat large. That could lead us to some vulnerabilities. The pandemic has affected certain huge parts of our economy. Rating downgrades had aggravated the situation. The confidence on the debt servicing, on some basis, because we were able to pay back two of the main debts outstanding, $2 billion, without any deferment at all, and we don't intend to do any deferment even in the future, has brought in some confidence, and high yields in the market sometimes can be a little disturbing as well. Sovereign ratings have come down from where we were some time ago, but we are confident that once these are put in place and they see results, then Sri Lanka will be able to go on a trajectory which is on the upward trend. The banking sector has been resilient, but we need to deal with a few issues. That will be something that we are discussing today. The non-banking sector also has seen some difficulties. There has been some finance companies that have failed. Those need to be also addressed, because there are lots of stakeholders that have been affected by that. The implementation of the consolidation program is another area which we need to be addressing our minds. And in the case of exporters, we find that the goods flow has taken place, and that's duly recorded as exports, but the corresponding amounts that need to come in as cash flows have not materialized at the same levels. Now, our research departments have access to all this information, and there's no need or reason for them to make any other reports on these matters. I have seen a few people getting a little excited that they are not hoarding any dollars, but they are actually repatriating and converting. That's what we really want. So if that is being done, there's absolutely no issue, and we are all on the same page. It is only those who have not done that, there is a concern, because an export actually becomes an export only once it is realized in rupees in this country. So there is a need for some instances for exports to have corresponding imports, which we recognize, and from the areas that we are going to talk to you about today, you would see that we have addressed that as well, perfectly in order, and we have to provide for that. But at the same time, we expect the exports to materialize as converted rupees, because that is where the whole exercise is there. So we expect that to happen, and we need to take a few steps to ensure that it happens. In many, many countries that happens. So we have sometimes borrowed technical expertise from those countries to understand how those countries are also dealing with it, and we would be dealing with that today as well. A few pressures have built up in the case of importers and exporters, mainly because of speculative reasons. We all know that when there is uncertainty, people provide for the worst, and that's a human tendency. You expect the worst. So if you expect the worst, if you feel that the rupee is depreciating, you would depreciate it to the worst number that you feel that it will go to. And when you do that, then you will provide for your selling price based on that too. So all those factors kick in, and that's why we have to make sure that that uncertainty is removed as quickly as possible. Service exporters other than tourism have also been affected. Industrialists have faced challenges. Money changers especially have lost their businesses, mainly because there was nothing much for them to encash when there was no tourism. Retailers and wholesalers have also been affected, although the food inflation has been at reasonable levels. I'm not saying at satisfactory levels, but it should be brought down further. Workers' remittances have also been affected in the past few months, particularly because of the fact that there was a dual exchange rate prevailing, and that helped them to go and get it outside the normal course of the banking sector. And also there was a reduction in the number of people who could go abroad, and that was another factor. Stocks and shares, the securities exchange would know that in the last few months, the stock exchange has been going forward well, but at the same time, the foreign holdings of both the government securities as well as equities have been dropping. At the same time, that gives us the feeling as well as the opportunity that it could go up to that level provided we get our factors right. Particularly the government securities. I remember at the end of 2014, we had $3,489 million. We have $9 million now, but that doesn't matter. We have to consider that space, and we are working on that now, and we are confident that that would soon be reversed and there would be a positive flow coming in. So would it be for the equities. The Securities and Exchange Act was passed just a few months ago, which meant that the long-felt need of new legislation has also occurred, and we are on the right track there. The central bank has also faced a few challenges, depletion of foreign reserves and the pressure, but we believe that those also could be addressed with the plan that we are going to put in place. The exchange rate impact on the central government's debt is another factor that we must all be conscious of, because the rupee depreciation can be a huge burden if you do have the debt in US dollars as well. If you have foreign debt, any depreciation of the currency could affect the total composition of the debt, and that is something that we must all be concerned about, and that is why the central bank takes the necessary steps to ensure that we bring stability. The people have faced challenges too, although several government policies have been helpful. The GDP loss has been addressed now, it's being addressed, and the allocations by government, about more than 200 billion rupees has also been stated, and the lockdown has definitely affected us as a whole. So now we are hoping to suggest to you or to tell you what the to-do list is. It's going to be a simple to-do list that each one will have to do, and that will help Sri Lanka to reset its course. Not too much, but a fairly clear reset, which will help us to go through the next 6 months without any undue additional worry or pain. So අපි ඒකට කියනවා කළ යුතු දේ ලයිස්තුවක් හැටියට අපිට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මේ දැන් තියෙන අභියෝග වලින් අපිට ඉදිරියට යන්නට නම් අපිට පැහැදිලි දර්ශනයක් අවශ්‍යයි, පැහැදිලි වැඩපිළිවෙලක් අවශ්‍යයි. ඒ වැඩපිළිවෙල අපේ රටේ ඉදිරි ගමනට සියලුම පාර්ශ්වකරුවන්ට බොහෝම පැහැදිලිව දඩුම් දෙන්නට පුළුවන් නම් අපිට එකතු වෙලා ඒ තිබෙන අභියෝගයට මුහුණ දෙන්නට පුළුවන් වෙන බව අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් මහා බැංකුවෙන් අපි යෝජනා කරන්නේ එවැනි කටයුත්තක් සියලු දෙනාම කළ යුතු දේවල් පිළිබඳව අපි ඒක ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමෙන් පසුව විවිධ පාර්ශ්වයන් වලට බොහොම පැහැදිලිව Taman කළ යුතු දේවල් ගැන හොඳ අදහසක් සහ අවබෝධයක් ලැබෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට එකමුතුව මේ කටයුත්තට පිවිසෙන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක තමයි අපේ අදහස. මේ පිවිසීම සඳහා රජය, මහා බැංකුව, බැංකු ක්ෂේත්‍රය, අපනයනකරුවන්, ආනයනකරුවන්, විවිධ පෞද්ගලික ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ සිටින අය, පිටරටවල් වලින් ඉඳලා ලංකාවට මුදල් එවන අය, කොටස් වෙළඳපොළ, අනිකුත් සියලුම පාර්ශ්වයන් එකතු වෙලා කළ යුතු දේවල් පිළිබඳව තමයි මේ සැලැස්ම ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්නේ. So the critical issues that we have will concern the debt and forex concerns. I think that is where a lot of people have certain concerns. and we need to address that. The financial sector concerns, the macroeconomic stability concerns. මම ඒව ගැන කියනවා නම් තීරණාත්මක සාධක කීපයක් තියෙනවා. මේ අවස්ථාවේදී අපිට අපේ කටයුතු ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට. එකක් තමයි ණය සහ විදේශ විනිමය පිළිබඳව අපි කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මොනවද කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම මූල්‍ය අංශය අපිට ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්නට නම් අපි කළ යුතු දේවල් මොනවද ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුලදී. ඒත් එක්කම සාර්ව ආර්ථික ස්ථායීභාවය රැකගෙන ඉදිරියට යන ගමනට අවශ්‍ය වන සාධක මොනවද කියලාත් අපි මෙතනදී කියන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. Property dealers, particularly those who are importing steel, cement and such industrial equipment, not to stockpile but to move forward with the current conditions without having any panic buying as well. Utilize the dedicated industrial zones, expand your campaigns and make use of the current resident and long-term visa incentives to attract more and more people to come into the country. Forex houses, we also ask them to ensure that they act in a responsible manner, and we are restoring all the licenses of those who had been cancelled in the recent past because they were unable to make their targets, and we will be restoring all those licenses. මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මුදල් හුවමාරු කරන ආයතන වලට අපි කියා සිටින්නේ ඒ ආයත මීට පෙර අපි තහනම් කරලා තිබිච්ච ඒ සියලුම licenses අපි නැවත ලබා දෙනවා. 27 දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා ඒ වගේ ඒ 27 දෙනාටම අපි ලබා දෙන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ කටයුතු වලට නිරත වෙන්නට අවශ්‍ය අයට ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ අයට අපි කියන්නේ Tamanගේ ඒ රාජකාරිය පුළුවන් තරම් මේ හොඳින් ඒක කරගෙන ඒ නීති රීති වලට අනුකූලව ඒ කටයුතු කරන්නයි කියලා අපි ආයෙකින් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. Those who are remitting money from outside, we are asking them to make use of the official channels. All the banks have now prepared methods by which monies can be remitted very, very easily and conveniently. So we are requesting all those who are making use of these facilities to to send money into Sri Lanka to make use of those channels. අපි සියලුම දෙනාගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා පිට රටවල් වලින් ඉඳලා ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට මුදල් එවනකොට සාමාන්‍ය බැංකු ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ තිබෙන ඒ පද්ධතිය පාවිච්චි කරලා මුදල් එවන්නට කියලා සියලුම බැංකු මම හිතන්නේ බොහොම පහසු කරලා තියෙනවා වෙන වෙන ක්‍රමවලට යොමු නොවි අපේ රටේ බැංකු ක්ෂේත්‍රය පාවිච්චි කරලා ඒ කටයුතු කරන්නයි කියලා අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. මොකද මම හිතන්නේ සමහර අවස්ථාවලදී වෙනස ටිකක් වැඩිපුර තිබුණකොට බොහෝ දෙනෙක්ට යම් අවස්ථාවක් ලැබෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ foreign exchange rate එකේ වෙනසක් තියෙනකොට ඒක depreciate වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් වැඩිපුර එතනදී වෙන මේ අර grey market කියලා කියනවා ඒක පාවිච්චි කරන්න සමහරක් අය යොමු වෙනවා. ඒක නොකර අපි දැන් foreign exchange rate එක stabilize කරන නිසා සාමාන්‍ය විදියට මේ මුදල් එවන්නයි කියලා අපි ඉල්ලීමකුත් කරනවා. The share market and the corporate debt market now also has a massive opportunity to regain some of the foreign investors that had left the country, and we would like you to make special road shows as well as other ways in which you can make it known to all those investors that Sri Lanka is back in business and Sri Lanka would like to have their investments back again. So that's another message that we would like to give to the world, and we hope that you will take that message as well. Let's now deal with the financial sector concerns. මූල්‍ය අංශය පිළිබඳ තිබෙන ගැටලු ගැන අපි දැන් සාකච්ඡා කරමු. ඒ සඳහා ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහා බැංකුව යෝජනා කරන සහ ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුලදී ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන මෙවලම් සහ අදහස් ගැන මම දැන් විග්‍රහ කරනවා. Firstly, the government, we would like the government to support and continue to support. They have always been supporting the consolidation effort of the financial sector. This sector had been for some time spoken of, but unfortunately it had not been moving at the right pace. But we would like to see that the non-banking sector consolidation occurs in the next few months. We want to see also the state-owned business enterprises diversifying their borrowing sources. Sometimes their borrowing sources have been confined to only the state banks or to others of that nature. but I believe the time is now necessary for them to diversify so that they can also be a lot more competitive, and the opportunities available to the private banks could also increase as time goes on. We also would like to see them taking business decisions so that when they are taking those decisions, they take into the factors of the profitability as well as the going concern, as well as supportive of the normal businesses in a business sense, are also considered carefully. The central bank would also provide support as well as do certain actions in the next 6 months. First of all, we want to see that the moratoria is unwinded gradually, not a sudden way. It has to be a soft landing. So we want to make sure that the lockdown effect, because it is being felt by so many businesses, that the central bank will advise the financial system as well as the sector to indulge in that in a gradual fashion. And we would also provide liquidity, because we find that a lot of the businesses will now have to pay the old loans plus the old interest, the new loans and the new interest, and that can be sometimes very, very challenging. අපි දන්නවා බොහෝ සුළු සහ මධ්‍යම පරිමාණයේ ව්‍යාපාරිකයන් Tamange පැරණි ණය සහ පැරණි පොලිය ඒත් එක්කම නව ණය සහ නව පොලිය ගෙවද්දී සෑහෙන පීඩනයකට ලක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මහ බැංකුවෙන් අපි තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව හොඳින් අවබෝධ කරගෙන ඒ අයට සහනයක් ලබා දීම සඳහා රුපියල් මිලියන 15000ක් අපි වෙන් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ ණය සහ ඒ ණය පොලිය පිළිබඳව සහනයක් ලබා දීමට. We will work out the modalities in due course. As you know, these plans were put together in a very short period of time because we wanted to give the clarity to the markets. But we would work out a scheme whereby we could provide that clarity as to how this would be implemented. But we are committing the funds so that we can provide that comfort to those businesses that are going to be over a period of next few months having to now grapple with the need to be paying back those loans that they had taken, as well as the loans for which they have already got a moratorium for. So that would be something that we would be doing. And during that period, we would put an emergency lending facility framework in place. We would immediately suspend the parate execution. We would like banks to follow that, and the forced repossession of leased assets up to 31st of March 2022 for the next 6 months, because we are recognizing that special circumstances has made it imperative that we provide that space, and during that period we would like the banks not to go through that process but to have other methods to persuade the payment but not to resort to that. අපි මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුලදී පරාට එක්සිකියුෂන් එක හරහා දේපල පවරා ගැනීම අපි බැංකු වලට ඉල්ලීමක් කරලා ඒක නොකර සිටින්නේ කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම වාහන නැවත පවරා ගැනීමත් අත්හිටුවන්නට කියලා ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුලදී අපි සියලුම බැංකු සහ මූල්‍ය ආයතන වලට උපදෙසක් දෙනවා. ඒත් එක්කම මේ වැටි සිටි ඇති මූල්‍ය ආයතන 6ක් තියෙනවා. ඒ 6 නැවත නැගිටවන්නටද ඒවා බැරිම තැනක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒවට අපි කළ යුතු දේවල් මොනවද කියලා ඒවත් පිළිබඳවත් ඉතා ඉක්මනින් අපි කටයුතු කරන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. We would be implementing a comprehensive plan to deal with the 6 failed finance companies and actively pursue the revival of those could be revived with new investment. We will also ask all banks to have post-COVID revival units, because there will be special problems that those businesses will encounter. We have to ensure that those businesses survive, and we would want the banks to hold their hand, work through these difficult periods so that those businesses can survive beyond the COVID pandemic. We would revive the governance and share ownership rules, and we would stop the multi-exchange rates taking place in banks. We have seen that happening, the multi-exchange rate. We have seen the banks, some banks, they follow what is specified by the central bank, but we have been told that between exporters and importers, there are other transactions that also take place at different rates of exchange. We have, in writing, I think the previous governor has mentioned that to the banking sector. We would like to see that being adhered to, and that those who do not adhere to will be they'll be flouting a direction, and we wouldn't like to see that happening, and we would like to see the banks following that and encourage all dealings to be within the normal transparent methods that are already introduced, and not to have any other types of transactions outside that realm. We would make sure that the expeditious consolidation of the non-bank financial sector would occur. I've already mentioned to you about the 6 failed finance companies and a comprehensive plan, and we would like to see that finish by the 31st of March 2023. We'll work on that deadline. I think these are complex issues, but even complex issues sometimes have simple answers. So we have to work on the complex issues, but have the ability to take certain decisions. And even ඒ පිළිබඳව අපිට money laundering වලට තිබෙන ඒ නීති රීති අනුව කටයුතු කරන්න සිදු වෙනවා. ඒත් එක්කම අපි ඒක කරද්දී අපි බලනවා ලෝකයේ පැවතින ඒ තත්ත්වයන් අනුව ඒක කටයුතු කරන්නත් අපේ අවධානම යොමු වෙලා තිබෙනවා. We'll improve the payments and settlements platform. We are in a digital age, and in that sense, the payments and settlements will need to keep pace with what is happening in the rest of the world. So we would be engineering the systems within the central bank. That, of course, will be done during the 6 months as well, but it will probably move beyond that period to ensure that the money is being in circulation, would have new methods of payments and settlements as well. We expect the banking sector to ensure that they set up the revival units, as I mentioned, and also particularly to consider a new financing model to support equity participation as well. We have had some discussions with several banks, and we are trying to develop models where new debt is not burdened upon borrowers. Those who have reached difficult periods as a result of the pandemic and otherwise, they need to be supported with new instruments as well. Adding debt to debt is not normally the way to go. ණය මත තවත් ණය පටවනකොට එතනදී පීඩනය වැඩි වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා ණය මත ණය පට ඒක කරන්නේ නැතුව ණය වෙනුවට වෙනත් අංශ හරහා මුදල් ලබා දෙන්නට කටයුතු කිරීමෙන් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නයට අපිට යම් විසඳුමක් ලබා දෙන්නට පුළුවන් වේවි. ඒ නිසා ඒ පිළිබඳව විශේෂ සැලකිල්ලක් දක්වලා වෙන වෙන පාර්ශ්ව එක්ක කටයුතු කරලා ඒ තුලින් ඒ නව මුදල් ඒ අංශවලට ලබා දෙන්නට කටයුතු කරන්නත් කියලා අපි විශේෂ ඉල්ලීමක් බැංකු වලටත් කියනවා. සමහර විට බැංකු වල තිබෙන පද්ධතිය අනුව ඒ අයට ඒ කටයුත්තට යෙදෙන්න බැරි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වුණත් ඒ කටයුත්තට යෙදෙන්න අවශ්‍යයි වෙන පාර්ශව හරහා. මොකද ඒ තුලින් තමයි මම හිතන්නේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට තිරසාර විසඳුමක් ලබා දෙන්නට පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒ පිළිබඳව විශේෂ සැලකිල්ලක් යොමු කරන්නයි කියලා අපි බැංකු වලින් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. ඒ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය වෙන තාක්ෂණ දැනුම සහ ඒ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය වෙන යම් නීති රීති මාලාවක් අවශ්‍ය නම් අපි ඒවත් කරන්නට අපි උදව් කරනවා කියන එකත් මම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී කියන්නට කැමතියි. Share market and the debt markets, we would like to see them having a plan which would take the Sri Lanka's equity markets as well as the debt markets to at least 50% of the rate of the GDP. And that's something that we would like to see the stock exchange and the SEC working towards. You can work with the other agencies of government as well. And that way, we would be able to see new avenues of capital coming into the country which can spur development as we go along. Now let's look at the last item, which is the macroeconomic stability concerns. I hope we can finish soon so that you all will all be relieved of all this and then you can get down to work. The සාර්ව ආර්ථික ස්ථායි භාවය රැක ගැනීම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය වන කටයුතු පිළිබඳව මම දැන් පැහැදිලි කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. First of all, the government, we understand the government has a very tricky as well as a very complex balancing act to perform. Government always has that, but in this particular period of time, as a result of the pandemic and the attendant charges on the overall government's budget, that has been even more complex. So I believe the next budget will be exercise which will have to be dealt with very carefully, and I believe the government is already taking the necessary measures to ensure that that is addressed in that fashion. A credible debt management strategy will be worked out. We already have given enough material for that, and our debt management will be done in such a way that Sri Lanka will not face any difficulty whatsoever. That's why I want to, at this stage itself, tell the stakeholders that we have no intention of going and asking any others for advice, although we can have technical advice from them on different areas. We have a team here which is talented, which have gone to the best universities of the world. They have got experience, and I believe that kind of expertise is sufficient for Sri Lanka to deal with the current issues. So I want to make that very clear, that Sri Lanka will rely on the in-house expertise that we have. We have trust and faith and confidence in those experts, and we work with those experts. We are also open to outside elements who can give us advice. We have a Financial System Stability Committee. We have a Monetary Policy Consultative Committee. All those committees are comprised of people of repute who provide the Central Bank with that advice. We listen to that advice, we take that advice, and you can be assured that having heard all that advice, we would be creating our own plans, like what we have done today, to go forward. So you can be sure that these are not ad hoc measures, these are carefully thought through measures which we believe will take us into the path of development as well as stability very, very quickly. We would work towards extending the average time to maturity of our debt stock, and we would work towards improving the doing business indicators as well. We have had some very good experiences in the past where we improved the debt, where we improved the doing business indicators. We would revisit those and improve that so that we can have a system where Sri Lanka will be a preferred destination as far as investors are also concerned. The law for the Colombo Port City Commission provides ample space for those who are doing business to come into the Sri Lankan space and do business, and we would use that as a support for our new thinking as well, and we would use that for the future in the normal course of other businesses as well. A comprehensive directory of physical investment opportunities has already been prepared by the government, for which we are very pleased and happy about, and we would like investors to make use of that as well so that they could be making use of those opportunities. The central bank also has a fairly tight as well as very extensive to-do list with regard to macroeconomic stability concerns as to how we are dealing with it. We would ensure the maintenance of mid-single-digit inflation, stability in exchange rates and interest rates, continue the steps that are being taken to curb the prohibited pyramid schemes and other financial scams, strengthen the central bank's balance sheet with a gradual rollback measure and a build-up of external reserves, introduce directions on IT risk resilience, strengthen the offsite surveillance, increase the frequency and modes of public awareness. We see a lot of scams that are taking place, and we want to keep the public posted of those scams so that they will also be aware that these are matters that they should guard against. Launch a green financing facility. We are providing a space within the SRR, the statutory reserve ratio, as well, for those who are having funds being brought in for this kind of purpose. Strengthen regional development activities. Develop new regulations on financial consumer protection. Sometimes we do hear certain institutions not adhering to those regulations, so we want to bring some teeth into the financial consumer protection. The have a friendly online submission of complaints to the central bank, establish credit counseling centers. Already we have one at Rajagiriya, but we want to expand that further. Help to set up the equity funds, discontinue the cash margin deposit requirements on the non-essential and non-urgent, as I mentioned to you already, and consider the possibility of buying back some of these bonds that are trading at very high discounts. We find that some of the ISBs are trading at discounts, but when a large chunk is sought after, that's not possible to buy. So the Sri Lankan bonds are being announced in these markets at very high discounts, which is not the case in actual fact, because many other investors have faith in our country. They hold on to our bonds till maturity, and you can be sure that their faith has not been in any way not honored by Sri Lanka, and we will continue to do that. So we would ask them sometimes to examine these quotations with a little more care, because sometimes I know they have to announce their balance sheets at mark-to-market numbers, but that alone is not good enough of a reason to sell off Sri Lankan bonds, because we know that those have actual value, and we would like those investors who have been with us over the last maybe 12 years to understand that Sri Lanka has the intention, as well as the plans, as well as the desire to make those payments, and we would like them to keep that in mind very carefully before you sell off any of your bonds. On the monetary front, the priorities will be maintaining the inflation at the targeted band. The monetary policy report we will be announcing with greater clarity, and there will be a publication as well. The central bank has observed in the recent past that there has been certain bubbles being formed, particularly in the motor industry, the motor vehicles, and that's something that we would like to see addressed. And the loan to value sometimes may be specified. I'm not a great fan of specifying those numbers as ratios, but sometimes if it is needed, we will do that. But we would ask the banks and the financial institutions to also examine their risk profiles carefully to ensure that those are given proper attention when those are being done. We would also, as I mentioned, provide some support to the green options. Regional development will be, initiatives will be continued to be promoted. I already mentioned to you about the growing menace of prohibited schemes. Those have to be dealt with, as well as other schemes like people being told that they have just won a car or they have just won $1 million, and to get that you have to pay some upfront fee. And a lot of people get fooled by those, so not to get fooled. And the central bank spends a lot of money in creating awareness about these things, but yet awareness is not sufficiently drilled down, and we are hoping that that also would occur. And we would carefully guide the stakeholders to tide over the pandemic difficulties. And I want to come to the final stages of this presentation by saying we would be outcome oriented. We are not merely setting out the plan. We would have a dedicated team of those who are involved in this process to ensure that these deliveries are done, that these are actually delivered. I remember the time that I was the governor previously, we had several conversations with our investors all over the world. And the most important part of those presentations was how we, at the beginning of the year, we said we would do this, and by the end of the year, our report card was almost 100%. So that is a bigger endorsement than anything else. So we have to set out a plan, stick to that, work on that, and ensure deliveries. I'm particularly happy to see one of the former board members who was there with me in the previous term, Mr. Neelomagilia here. We worked together to ensure that those plans that we had put out to the people were delivered on time and on target. So we want to do the same thing this time around as well. These plans that we just announced to you, what we are going to do, we would diligently work on that to ensure that those would be delivered on time. I'd like to give you a summary of what we have said so far. I'll make it a little brief and point-oriented so that it'll be easy for people to absorb. 1. Intervene in the forex market by providing the funds to finance the country's energy bills and thereby to infuse liquidity. 2. Promote investments in rupee-denominated government securities with a guarantee on the exchange rate. 3. Strengthen mandatory conversion of export proceeds. 4. Request the government to tax profits of exporters at 28% and not 14%, where forex is not repatriated and converted, of course within the limits that have been specified. 5. Expand the moratorium while also providing liquidity support to affected finance companies. Stop parate executions and repossession of vehicles in the next 6 months for pandemic-affected borrowers. 7. Share the burden of pandemic losses suffered by local SMEs by allocating rupees 15,000 million towards interest accrued through a mechanism which is to be worked out. 8. Use monetary policy tools to unwind monetary stimulus extended during the pandemic. 9. Use macroprudential tools as well as macroprudential regulation and supervision to guide the financial sector towards sustained stability. 10. Facilitate education and health-related forex outflows immediately. We know that a lot of people have had some difficulties about taking money for various educational purposes as well as health-related purposes. We will facilitate that immediately so that that problem wouldn't occur for the future. Lift the ceiling imposed on outward investment and migration allowance effective from January 22. Already the regulations have been framed and issued. That's why we are not changing that for the time being. But no sooner that those regulations are completed by December 2021, we will not renew those, but we would allow that to happen so that those conditions could provide those who are migrating with the space for them to take out their money at the time that they want to take it out. Discontinue the cash margin deposits requirements on non-essential and non-urgent imports. We know that several people have been undergoing various difficulties as a result. That would be lifted from today. Establish, I remember the Prime Minister himself mentioned that this should be done, and I believe there has been a lot of people who have been affected by that, although it did serve the purpose at the time that it was imposed, and then it did have the necessary support for the balance of payments at that time. We believe now with the current inflows that we are envisaging, as well as the steps that we are taking, we would be in a position to relax that with immediate effect. We would establish the International Transactions Reporting System to monitor foreign exchange transactions commencing on January 1st, 22. Monitor services related foreign exchange inflows and ensure due repatriation and conversion. 15. Replace maturing debt obligations with new inflows through non-debt sources wherever possible. 16. Consider the possibility of buying back the entire issue of ISPs maturing in January 22 and July 22 if high discounts are prevalent continuously. 17. Replace maturing ISPs with government-to-government loans until ISPs to GDP percentage declines to 10% or less. 18. Take measures to improve the sovereign ratings. 19. Strengthen workers' remittances through official channels. And 20. To restore licenses of money changers. So that's our own obligation and the duties that we have taken upon ourselves, and we would fulfill that. For purposes of record, may I mention that in Sinhala as well, so that the media could pick it up. පළවෙනියෙන්ම අපි මේ දැනට කරන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන කටයුතු සියල්ල ගැනම සාරාංශයක් මම ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට කැමතියි. පළවෙනියෙන්ම රටේ බොරතැල් බිල්පත් ගෙවීමට අවශ්‍ය මුදල් සපයමින් විදේශ විනිමය වෙළඳපොළ වෙත ද්‍රව්‍යශීලතාව වැඩි කිරීමට අපි යොමු කරන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා කිසිම කෙනෙකුට කිසිම මේ සැකයක් තබා ගන්නට අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. බොරතෙල් හිඟයක් හෝ ගෑස් හිඟයක් හෝ ඒ වගේ කිසි දෙයක් සිදු වෙයි කියලා මුදල් නැතිකම නිසා විවිධ අංශ ඒ පිළිබඳව කතා කරලා තිබුණත් ඒ සියලුම කතාව සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම නිෂ්ප්‍රභා කිරීම සඳහා මහා බැංකුව ඒකට කටයුතු කරන බවට මා අද මෙහිදී කියා සිටිනවා. දෙවනුව විනිමය අනුපාතිකය පිළිබඳ සහතිකයක් ලබා දී රුපියල් වටිනාකම මගින් නියාමනය කරන නාමනය කරන ලද රජයේ සුරකම් පොත්වල ආයෝජන ප්‍රවර්ධනය කිරීම. බොහෝ දිනෙකට පෙර කාලවලදී රජයේ සුරකම් පොත්වලට ආයෝජන කිරීමට අපි අවස්ථාව ලබා දීලා තිබුණා. ඒ අය ඩොලර් ගෙනාවත් සමහර විට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ඩොලර් ගෙනාවම ඒ අයට සැකයක් තිබෙනවා නම් රුපියල අප්‍රමාණය වෙයි කියලා ඒ සැකය දුරු කිරීම සඳහා මහා බැංකුව ඒ අයට ඒ මුදල් ලබා දීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. තුන්වෙනුව අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ලෙස රුපියල් බවට පරිවර්තනය කිරීමට සිදුවෙන ඒ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය අපි දියත් කරලා ඒක ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ සඳහා සියලු දෙනාගේම මේ සහයෝගය අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. අපි ඒත් එක්කම රජයට කියා සිටිනවා ඕනෑම අපනයනයක් බවට පත් වෙන්නේ ඒ අපනයන අන්තිමටම රුපියල් බවට පත්වීම හරහා රුපියල් එන්නට ඕනේ රටට. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා තමයි රජය ඒ අපනයනකරුවන්ට විශේෂ සහන ආකාරයට බදු සහනයක් ලබා දෙන්නේ. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් බදු ගෙවන්නේ 28%ක නම් එය 14% බවට පත් කරන්නේ ඒ පදනම මත. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒක සිදු වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඒ පදනම අභිමයට යම්කිසි බාධාවක් සිදු වෙනවා. ඉතින් එහෙම නොවන්නට අපි රජයෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. දැනට ලබා දීලා තිබෙන ණය පමා කිරීම ඒ ක්‍රමවේදය තවදුරටත් කරගෙන යාම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා නම් ද්‍රවශීලතාවය ලබා දෙන්නට මහා බැංකුව ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා. පරාට එක්සිකියුෂන් වලින් දේපල පවරා ගැනීම සහ වාහන පවරා ගැනීම ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුලදී නවත්වන්නට කියලා අපි නියෝග ලබා දෙනවා බැංකු ක්ෂේත්‍රයට සහ බැංකු නොවන ක්ෂේත්‍රයට. එයාට අපි කියනවා මේ අවස්ථාවේදී තව මාස 6ක් ඒක නොකර ඉඳලා ඊට පසුව ඒ ගැන අපි සලකලා බලලා කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම මේ අපේ පැන්ඩෙමික් එක හරහා වසංගතය ඔස්සේ සමහරක් ව්‍යාපාර වලට වෙලා තිබෙන ඒ හානිය දුරු කර ගැනීම සඳහා ණය වැඩිපුර ගෙවන්න සිදු වෙන තැන්වලදී ණය ගෙවා ගන්නට අමාරු වෙන තැන්වලදී ඒ ණය පමා කිරීම පරක්කු කරන වෙලාවවලදී ඒ අයට සහනයක් ලබා දීම සඳහා රුපියල් මිලියන 15000ක් අපි වෙන් කළා. ඒක ගැන අපි ඊළඟ සති දෙක තුන තුලදී මේ නිවේදනයක් නිකුත් කරන්නත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. දැනට පිට රටවල් වලට යන අයට ලබා දීලා තිබෙන ඒ සහන තමන්ගේ මුදල් ගෙනියන්නට ලබා දීලා තියෙන සහන දිගටම ලබා දෙන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ජනවාරි 1 වෙනිදා ඉඳලා යම් ඉගෙනීම සඳහා සහ සෞඛ්‍ය සඳහා මුදල් ලබා ගැනීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන සියලු දෙනාටම තමන්ට මේ මුදල් ලබා දීමටත් අපි කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා. ඒත් එක්කම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නොවන හදිසි නොවන ආනයන සඳහා පනවා තිබූ ආන්තික මුදල් දැන්පතු අවශ්‍යතාවය වහාම ක්‍රියාත්මක වන පරිදි අපි අත්හිටවනවා. බොහෝ දෙනෙක්ට ඒ පිළිබඳව අමාරු තත්ත්වයක් තියෙන බව මට ඊයේ පෙරේදා අපේ අගමැතිතුමාත් දැනුම් දුන්නා. ඒ පිළිබඳව අපි ඒකට සලකලා බලලා ඒ අනුව ඒ අයට මින් ඉදිරියේදී ඒක සිදු නොවන්නට අපි කටයුතු කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. 2022 ජනවාරි 1 වෙනිදා සිට ආරම්භ වන පරිදි විදේශ විනිමය ගනුදෙනු අධීක්ෂණය කිරීම සඳහා ජාත්‍යන්තර ගනුදෙනු වාර්තාකරණ පද්ධතියක් අපි ස්ථාපනය කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. 14 සේවා සම්බන්ධ විදේශීය විනිමය ගලායම් අධීක්ෂණය කිරීම සහ එම මුදල් ආපසු රට තුළට ගෙන්වා ගැනීම සහ පරිවර්තන කිරීම සහතික කරන ආකාරයට අපි කටයුතු කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. කල්පිරෙන ණය බැඳීම් සහ සෑම අවස්ථාවකදීම ණය නොවන මූලාශ්‍ර හරහා ලැබෙන නව ලැබීම් මගින් පියවීමට අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. වෙළඳ පොළ තුළ ඉහළ මට්ටම් පවතී නම් 2022 වසරේ ජනවාරි මාසයේ සහ ජූලි මාසයේ කල්පිරෙන ජාත්‍යන්තර ස්වෛරීය බැඳුම්කරයන්හි සමස්ත නිකුතුව ආපසු විලදී ගැනීම සඳහා අපි සලකලා බලන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ජාත්‍යන්තර ස්වෛරීය බැඳුම්කර දළදේශීය නිෂ්පාදිතයේ ප්‍රතිශතයක් ලෙස 10% වගේ ප්‍රමාණයකට අඩු කරන්නත් අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ස්වෛරීය ශ්‍රේණිගත කිරීම ඉහළ නැංවීමට පියවර ගන්නවා. නිල මාර්ග ඔස්සේ විදේශ සේවා නියුක්තිකයන්ගේ ප්‍රේෂණ ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා දිරිමත් ලබා දෙන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මුදල් හුවමාරු කරන්නන්ගේ බලපත්‍ර 27ක් අද සිට අපි නැවත ලබා දෙන්නටත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ අයගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කරන්නේ ඒ වැඩ කටයුතු වල Tamanගේ ඒ රාජකාරියට අනුකූලව තිබෙන ඒ නීති රීති ඔස්සේ කටයුතු කරන්නයි කියලා. So measures implemented will ease the difficulties currently faced by the public. We will facilitate the education and health related forex outflows, as I just mentioned. We will lift the restriction on the migration allowance. We will facilitate the fuel and other essential imports, thereby ensuring uninterrupted supplies, enhancing the real returns to savers with the correction in the deposit interest rates, support the credit availability at reasonable lending interest rates, maintaining stable price levels, thereby easing the cost of living. A lot of times what happens is when there's uncertainty, everyone tends to protect themselves and increase prices. So if you can bring the stability back, you would find that that reason that prompted people to increase prices will not be there. බොහෝ අවස්ථාවලදී අවිනිශ්චිත අවස්ථාවලදී අපි දැකලා තියෙන එක දෙයක් තමයි බොහෝ දෙනෙක් Tamanගේ විකුණන මිල වැඩි කරන්නට පෙළඹෙනවා. ඒ පෙළඹෙන්නෙත් තමාගේ ඒ ව්‍යාපාර බොහොම පරිස්සම් කරගන්නට අවශ්‍ය කියලා හිතන නිසා. ඒ අය දන්නවනම් මේ தত্ত্বය අපිට ස්ථායීව පවත්වාගෙන යන්නට පුළුවන් කියලා බොහෝ විට එහෙම අවශ්‍යතාවයක් සිදු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි දැක්කා ඒ වගේ කාලයක් අපිට පුළුවන් වුණා පවත්වන්න 2014 දී සාහිත පෙර කාලෙදී එවැනි තත්ත්වයක් අපි නැවත නිර්මාණය කිරීමට නැවත ඇති කිරීමට කටයුතු කරන්න අවශ්‍යයි. අපි මේ පිළිබඳවත් අපේ විශේෂ සැලකිල්ල අපි යොමු කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. Ensuring the stability of the financial system, thereby protecting the savings of the public. These outcomes will complement the measures that have already been taken by the central bank and the government to assist businesses and individuals to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. What will be the results that we would like to see by the end of March 22? Our gross official reserves will be enhanced to cover a minimum of 4 months of imports. Our foreign holdings will, in the rupee-denominated government securities, will increase to at least $1 billion. We'll have a diversified SLDB investor base. We will have a stable exchange rate and a stable interest rates. We'll have that long before that, but definitely by end of March 22, we would have all those in place. We'll have a stronger central bank balance sheet, a stronger banking and non-bank sector, a weekly treasury bill auction, which is now today 75 billion rupees, will then shrink to around 50 billion rupees, and we'll have real GDP growth of around 5% in 2021, and certainly we'll aim at 6.5% by the first quarter of 22, and I believe we should be able to achieve that without too much difficulty and stabilized inflation at mid-single digits. We have a summary timeline of the targeted inflows. I won't deal with it, but it will be there in the handout as well as the email that we would send to all participants as well as those who wish to have it. We'll also have it in the central bank's website from now onwards so that all can see what numbers we are committing ourselves to and numbers that we would be driving towards. අපි පැහැදිලි අපේ ඉලක්කම් වශයෙන්ම ලබා දීලා තිබෙනවා. ඒවා පසුපස හඹා යන්නට අපි කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒවා අපි පැහැදිලිව ලෝකෙට ලබා දෙන්නේ ඒ අයට අපේ වැඩ කටයුතු ඊට පස්සේ මනින්නට පුළුවන්. ඒවා හරහා අපි ඒවට කටයුතු කරන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන නිසා අපි ඒවා ප්‍රසිද්ධිය ලබා දෙන්නේ ඒවා අපි සාර්ථකව ඉෂ්ට කර ගැනීමට සියලුම කටයුත්තක් කරන බව ඉතා පැහැදිලිව මේ රටටත් ලෝකයටත් කියා සිටීම සඳහා. Finally, we believe that what is important is the implementation. මේවා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නට අවශ්‍යයි. අපේ මූලික අරමුණක් වෙන්නට වන්නේ මේ අපි අද ලබා දීලා තිබෙන සියලුම සැලසුම් ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට අපේ සම්පූර්ණ ශක්තිය යොදවලා ඒක අපි කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා කියන එක. මහා බැංකුව හැටියට අපි ඒ කටයුත්තට අපි සම්පූර්ණයෙන් කැප වෙනවා. ඒත් එක්කම රජයත් එක්ක ඒ කටයුතු කරන්නට අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. අනිත් සියලුම පාර්ශවකරුවන්ගේත් සහයෝගය ලබාගෙන ඒක කරන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. අපි මෙතනදී කිසිම කෙනෙකුට ඇඟිල්ලක් දික් කරනවත් නෙමෙයි. කිසිම කෙනෙකුට අපි වැරද්දක් කියනවා නෙමෙයි. අපි මෙතනදී කරන්නේ අපි සියලු දෙනාම තේරුම් ගන්නට අවශ්‍යයි. අපි මේ යන ගමන අපි යා යුත්තේ එකතු වෙලා. එකතු වෙලා යනකොට පාර්ශ්වකරුවන්ට සමහර විට විවිධ අදහස් තියෙන්නට පුළුවන්. විවිධ අයට අරමුණු වෙනස් වෙන්නට පුළුවන්. ඒ වෙනස් වුණත් අපිට ඒක අරමුණක් තියෙන්නට ඕනේ රට වෙනුවෙන්. අපි එතනට යනවා නම් මම හිතන්නේ අපිට ඒක ඉතාමත්ම සාර්ථකව කරගන්න පුළුවන්. අපි මේ කාලය තුලදී වගකීමකින් ඒ කටයුත්තට නිරත වෙන්න ඕනේ කියන එකත් මම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මතක් කරලා දෙන්නට කැමතියි. 2022 අවසන් වෙන විට අපේ රට අලුත් මාවතකට හැරෙන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට ඒ කරන යන වැඩ කටයුතු සියල්ලක්ම ඉතාමත් පැහැදිලි ලෙස අපිට ඉදිරියට යන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක තමයි අපේ මතය. Towards the end of 22 we would be able to approach the economy of the country with much greater confidence than what we have. We would see the results of what we are doing today. We would see the benefits of the cooperation that we are today appealing to everyone to provide. Because if we do it on those lines, we would find that each one's role becomes much easier to handle. So our role would be to ensure that all stay on the path, and that if any persons are in any way moving in a different direction, to gently nudge them and to get them on track. And we would also commit ourselves to those numbers as well as those plans with the greater dedication, because of the fact that we have to deliver for this nation to prosper and go forward. I want to thank the President who reposed his confidence in me specifically and invited me to take on this role once again. I want to ensure that we deliver on his expectations, the Prime Minister's expectations too, and the Finance Minister's. We know we have a great role to play here. It's a very important role in this juncture of our country's forward march, and I'm blessed with a great set of people who are also working in a dedicated fashion so we can move forward with clarity. I want to thank the Monetary Board members, the staff, particularly the Director Economic Research, Dr. Chandranath, who worked tirelessly with his team to put this plan together. It has been done in a very, very short period of time. I think it must be amazing effort, and I want to thank all of them for their dedication, the Deputy Governors, the Assistant Governors, and all who, from top to bottom, who responded magnificently to be able to put together a plan of this nature, which encompasses so many different parts so that we can move forward with clarity. This is a dynamic plan. It is one that is having different variables. All these variables need to be balanced one with the other. Sometimes it's a tough call to balance all these different variables. So we would sometimes tweak it. We will sometimes change it. We will sometimes have to take additional measures to stay on course. But that's the best part of plans, that you must have a guiding plan in front of you, and you will have different strategies that you would use to put you on target to move forward. So that's the commitment that I want to give all of you, and together we will succeed. Thank you very much.